Please open up your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6. And we'll be reading from verses 1 to 4. And if you're able, please rise for the reading of God's Word. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your heaven who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. This morning, we're going to be looking at the first of the three pious acts mentioned in the Sermon on the Mount. And the three that we'll be looking at are giving, praying, and fasting. And we are going to look at giving today. But let me ask you before I go more in depth on this. Have you seen those videos on social media where people go around giving money to people who are helping them out? Right? When you watch videos like this, you feel all warm and fuzzy inside as, people in need are being helped and so on. But sometimes you have to stop and wonder, is this, and nowadays, you really have to ask this question, is this staged? Is this genuine? Right? Often called performative charity, it's where people upload videos of people or influencers helping others. Now, I don't know whether it's genuine or not, or whether they're doing it for views and followers, or they really want to help the person. But when I see something like that filmed and uploaded by someone other than a stranger, especially if it's uploaded to their own account, I'm a bit skeptical about their genuineness. Now, the one on the very right here is a little different than the other two. I don't know if you guys know the famous Chinese actor named Chow Yun-fat, or maybe you know him from the famous movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Right, he's a very famous actor, and that's actually a video that a stranger caught of him moving a tree that has fallen because of the storm that went by. And people found out that he's been actually doing a lot of charity work, putting hats and hoodies so that no one notices him, and people have noticed it and praised him for that work. So it makes you wonder, right, with all the phones and cameras these days to capture these acts of charity and giving, what's the motive? Sure, it's still a great act of charity, and I'm all for that, but the motive and the heart for such an act is in question. It's not just me. Right? It's not just Christians wondering this, but other people on the internet also genuinely question the motive behind such videos as well. We live in a world where people are blowing digital trumpets, so to speak, to get more likes and views. And what that means is that what Jesus is teaching us here in these verses is still relevant to us today. But let me show you another example. I came across this video of the actor Denzel Washington giving a little tribute to Samuel L. Jackson. Let me just show you a little snippet of it.
Many awards, obviously, big box office. You know all about that. Here's what you don't know. These are, and there's a few of them, the organizations that Samuel L. Jackson and his wife, LaTanya Jackson, give to. Alzheimer's Association, American Institute for Stuttering, American Red Cross, Artists for New South Africa, Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, Black Economic Alliance, the Brain Trust, Cedars-Sinai, Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, Carousel of Hope, Children's Defense Fund, Desmond and somebody Tutu, Legacy Foundation, Earth Island Foundation, the Hollywood Foundation for Autism and Parkinson's Disease, In a Perfect World Foundation, the Joseph Lowery Institute for Social Change, Magic Johnson Foundation, Spelman College, Morehouse College, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, National Action Network, Kidney Foundation, Solutions Coalition, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History, Spelman College, United Negro College Fund, and the Urban League. That's what he's been doing. I don't know what y'all been doing.
I don't think he knew that about Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, you probably know him as the guy who plays Nick Fury in those Marvel movies, or the guy who says that famous catchphrase that became his mother. And before this part of the clip, he talks about how he's been in like the most number of movies, like the total amount of money that the movies that he's been in and raised is like number one and stuff like that. And what people didn't know is that he's been giving all that money away to charities and foundations. And no one noticed unless they looked into it or until someone like Denzel Washington revealed it. Again, we cannot know someone's heart. I don't know with what heart or with what motive Mr. Samuel L. Jackson gave. Only the self and the God knows. And Jesus warns us today to be aware of practicing our righteousness before others in order to be seen by them. So today I want us to look at the meaning of true giving that is a part of true worship that with the following 3 points. Giving for piety, as in giving for religious duty, giving for self, and finally giving for God. Now let me first lay out some background information for this verse, because it is a little difficult because it's about something that happened a long time ago in a very faraway place in a very different culture. But this is going to help us understand what kind of giving Jesus is talking about here. Now, let me just say up front first that this is not a sermon on money or the importance of tithe and such. That sermon is for later. This is about giving, and not just money, but giving what we have to others in need. As Pastor Eugene Peterson translates this passage in the Message version of the Bible, he says, when you do something for someone else, it's not just almsgiving, just giving money to others or food to others. It's just when you do something for someone else, especially those in need. True giving is not the amount or even who you give to, but rather for whom you give. Let me repeat that because that's the main point of this sermon. True giving is not about the amount or even who you give to, but for whom you give. Meaning it's about the heart, right? It's about the motive. It's about the object of worship. And first of all, notice how Jesus says, when you give. And in the following passages, he says, when you pray and when you fast. Not if you give, but when. It means that giving, praying, and fasting were required of Jews, and that stayed the same for Christians as well. Giving was a religious requirement for the Jews. Right? It was one of the 3 pillars of their faith, which are giving, praying, and fasting. So Jesus already assumes that his disciples who are listening to the sermon were already giving to the needy. But this sermon addresses both those who are not giving for the wrong reasons and those who are giving also for the wrong reasons. But there were different kinds of givings that we need to know about. Now, I'll just categorize them as the trumpet, the basket, the plate, and the street. Okay? So these are the kinds of giving that the people did. Now, first, the trumpet. What is this? So in the temple, right? So, and this is the second temple that Jesus is during Jesus' time, there was a second temple. The first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And then Zerubbabel, the Jewish governor, started rebuilding it. And then Herod the Great rebuilt it, expanded it extensively, right? It was a very famous architecture. Now, there is a court called the Court of Women. Okay? Although it was called the Court of Women, both men and women were permitted. It's called the Court of Women because that's the furthest point in which women were permitted to enter. Now, in that court was the treasury, and there were 13 trumpet-shaped chests for the collection of voluntary offerings and mandatory temple taxes. So they were made of like metal and such, and it had like a little trumpet shape, right? And each chest would be dedicated to a certain type of offering. So there were 13 in all. And this is a time when people still gave sacrifices at the temple. You could bring your own animal, right? Animal without blemish. But the problem with that is you could come and the priest would examine the animal, and if there's a blemish or there's a little like, oh, it's missing a toe or things like that, right? They had to bring it back, and that would create a big problem for the people, for the worshipers, right? They would travel from far, far away, right, to the temple to give sacrifice to God. And then if they had blemish, they have to go all the way back and bring another animal, right? You can see how that could give a headache. So during this time, there was an option to bring money and pay the temple so that they could buy a unblemished animal from a merchant that they could trust. Right? It was convenient for them too. So, for example, the first chest was for the current year's donation. The second chest for the previous year. Third chest for buying 2 doves or 2 pigeons, one for burnt offering, one for sin offering. The fourth one for those who just needed pigeons, right? And the fifth one for those who volunteered towards purchasing wood for the altar. And a tithe of these would be given to priests to support them. It's similar to how a church functions on donations and offerings. And we have like different categories of offerings nowadays too, right? For building fund, for so-and-so ministry, for missions, and so on, right? It was similar to that. And this was one of the obligatory offerings or givings that people were expected to do. Now the basket was something called a kupa, okay? And it was like a charity fund. So they wove it so that the money would not fall through, right? So it was a basket essentially. That's why it's called basket. And people would put funds in this basket on a weekly basis, and it was to be distributed to the local poor on a regular basis as well. And this is the basis for basically the public charity funds. And the plate was something called tamkhui, and tamkhui maybe, and it was like a soup kitchen. So people would donate food or money on a daily basis to help those who just needed some help to get by, right? These are not the poor who are always poor, but like transient poor, like, they hit a hard time and they're just like kind of lacking some food on the table right now. It was to help them or travelers passing by. And think of it like soup kitchen or food bank. And the last one was not a fund collected, but a system for the beggars. These were for the poor. During this time, begging was common and actually a licensed and socially structured occupation. You actually had to have a license to do this. And it was like almost like an occupation for the poor. And you see this often in the New Testament where beggars or lame are placed near high traffic areas so that they could receive money or help from people. Like the lame beggar placed in front of the beautiful gate in Acts chapter 3 where Peter and John comes and says, I don't have gold or silver, but what I do have, I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ, rise up, right? So these were required of Jews as an act of piety, as their religious duty, and Jesus doesn't question that. He doesn't say that that's wrong, okay? He actually assumes that that's what needs to be done. What he does question is the motive behind the act of giving. Now, some commentators think the words like sounding trumpets in these verses literally or figuratively. For example, some commentators believe that there were people who would actually announce with trumpets before they gave like big donations so that they would draw attention to themselves. And some commentators believe that people would make the coin clanking sound. So those trumpet sounding ones, right? You drop it in, right? The coins, right? If you put your hand to the trumpet and drop it in, it's a little quiet. But imagine like somebody brought like a whole bunch of coins and dropped it from up here. It will make a lot of sound, right? And that's maybe like one way like this is interpreted as well. So but there are no records showing this is what people did. But what is true is this, okay? Regardless of whether this was literally, they did this literally or figuratively, Jesus is saying, don't be your own trumpeter. Meaning, don't draw attention to yourself in order to receive praise. Again, today, right, some people would share like big donations in order to gain influence in the church. Right? Hey, don't you remember how much offering I give on a weekly basis, on a yearly basis? I'm one of the top givers, right? I should have a say in this decision. Or some people will, donate like a big amount so that they would have their name on one of the rooms or their ministry center and so on. Right? This is the same thing. And Jesus is warning against that. Now, the point is not about private giving versus public giving either. Just a chapter before this, we saw Jesus talk about salt and light. And in particular, he tells them to let their light shine before others so that others may see your good work and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Be seen, Jesus says. So it's a little confusing, right? So what is Jesus saying? Show it or hide it? Let me give you an illustration. In the Bible, there was a man named Barnabas. Okay, this is where the name Barney, the dinosaur, comes from, Barnabas. Now, his real name was not Barnabas. It's actually Joseph. But Barnabas was a nickname that he received, which means son of encouragement. Right? He was so encouraging to others that his nickname became son of encouragement. Barnabas. And he appears in the end of Acts chapter 4. Right? He's famous for being that guy who sold, a field that belonged to him, brought all the money to the apostles' feet so that they could distribute it to the poor. Was that public? Yes. Was it inappropriate? No. Right? He doesn't show any sign of trying to receive praise for this. He kind of consider it as something that he ought to do. Right? Think nothing of it. This is, as a Christian, this is my duty, and that's what he does. Here's what was inappropriate. Immediately after mentioning Barnabas, we see a couple in Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira. They also sold a piece of property that belonged to them, and both of them decided to keep back a portion of it and brought only a part of it to the apostles' feet, but pretended that this was everything. Basically, they were trying to do the same thing as Barnabas, and I guess they were hoping to receive same kind of praise, like being nicknamed Barnabas or the super couple kind of thing. But in the end, if you know that story, they both die. Why? Because they were doing it for dishonest reasons. They could have kept a portion of the money. There was nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, hey, we sold a piece of property, right? And we wanted to give a portion of that to the apostles so that they could distribute to the poor. There was nothing wrong with that. But the motive was for them to buy a holy reputation. That's why. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to buy a holy reputation. They hid their true motive, but still wanted the praise of others. A Scottish theologian named A.B. Bruce puts it this way. It's like a summary, right? He says, show when you are tempted to hide, and hide when you are tempted to show. And I think that's a maxim that we can follow. Show when you are tempted to hide. Like, how Jesus says, don't hide the lamp under a basket. When you're tempted to hide, show it. And hide it when you're tempted to show, to receive praise from others. So again, what is Jesus saying here? Regardless of whether your giving is in public or private, your heart is seen by God, and that's what matters. So the problem is not about making your giving public or private, but the core issue is the heart's motive. Because a lot of the times, people give for selfish reasons. So here's point number 2, giving for self. Abigail Marsh is the professor of psychology, interdisciplinary neuroscience, and cognitive science at Georgetown University. She graduated from Harvard, and she's known for her TED Talk called Why Some People Are More Altruistic Than Others, meaning some people give more than others. And she argues that people feel good when they help others, and there's nothing wrong with that. She adds that the fact that our brains are wired to feel deep happiness when we alleviate someone else's suffering proves that humans are fundamentally built to be connected, cooperative, and caring creatures. The Chinese people also understood this way, way long ago too. It's like the Chinese proverb that says, if you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. I don't know what they mean by that. But if you want to be happy for a year, inherit a fortune. And if you want to be happy for a lifetime, help someone. And what's more, she's noticed that those who are more altruistic are those who are not self-centered. These people don't feel that they are more special or superior compared to others, and they don't see themselves at the center of the universe and view every human life with equal inherent importance, and absolutely no one is unworthy of compassion. Sounds a lot like what Jesus has been teaching us. Those who are poor in spirit are those who consider themselves no better than others, and they're also merciful, for they see that others are just as inherently valuable, and then they also need help just as much as we do. And there is nothing wrong with feeling good by giving to others. God calls them blessed. Happy are they who are merciful. But what Jesus is warning against is giving for a different kind of joy. The joy of feeling recognized, feeling superior. Here's how Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones puts it. He says, ultimately, our only reason for pleasing men around us is that we may please ourselves. Our real desire is not to please others as such. We want to please them because we know that if we do, they will think better of us. In other words, we are pleasing ourselves and are merely concerned about self-gratification. Because humans have this deep need for validation, Right? Just look at kids. They're always going to their parents like, look at me, look what I can do, right? Look what I made, and so on. What are they seeking? Validation. And as adults, we're not that different. We just seek it through different means. Whether it's through romantic love, or respect, or recognition, reputation, or likes on Instagram, like those little thumbs up, or having your name on a plaque, we feel the need for validation also. But Jesus is warning us against practicing our religious duties in order to receive validation from man. Jesus says that those who do that have received their reward. And the term that Jesus uses here is a commerce term where the bill has been paid. Full stop. Meaning there's nothing more to come. It is closed. There's no more payment, no more bonus coming. That's it. And those who help the needy in order to receive people's recognition won't receive anything from the Father, is what Jesus is saying. Your reward is simply that little thumbs up on Facebook, and that's it. Nothing from your Heavenly Father who sees in secret. It's a scary thought, isn't it? You see, Jesus is telling us to beware. And this word is in the present active tense because meaning it's an ongoing action. Always beware. Always be alert. Because that sweet temptation of recognition is real. The temptation is to say, aren't I great? But the true giving that Jesus talks about makes people go, isn't God great? And I'll confess to you as well that I felt this temptation as well many times, even as a preacher. There were times when I wanted people to recognize how good of a sermon I preached, or I wanted to recognize all the hard work and research and insight that I had. I wanted people to see me as a powerful preacher, who is not like other preachers who only talk about their ideas, but someone who preaches Jesus, right? Inside I would think, I'm not like those preachers. And I wanted to hear that from others as well. And if I preached in order to hear from people words like, wow, Pastor David, that was a great sermon, and feel happy about the compliment, then that is my reward and that's it. But true giving is not about the self. Again, to use preaching as an example, the kind of preaching that fits under true giving will be where I am forgotten by the end of the sermon and only Jesus is left in the hearts and minds of people, and where I don't think twice about receiving a compliment. That's the kind of true giving that I need to aim for. That's the kind of true giving that we ought to be aiming for. And that's what Jesus means by do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. It's an idiom, right? I mean, how are you going to do this, right? Are you going to hide your hand kind of doing this? No, it means you're not thinking twice about what you're doing. To think nothing of it. Like it's an obvious thing to do. Not thinking to yourself, wasn't I great for doing that? Or maybe now God will bless me. Or I hope someone finds out about what I did and tell others about it, because I can't say that with my own mouth. Again, whenever the self is involved in those inner voices, it may not be a true giving. Now, I'm not saying this to condemn you. This sermon is not about condemnation. This is a diagnostic tool to check for yourself what your heart is like when you give. True giving is so unself-conscious that it does not even narrate itself to its own giver. Like, oh, look how much I'm giving here. No, that's not what it is. A good test is this. Do I give more when others are watching compared to when no one is around to see me or recognize me? And I'm, again, not just about offerings and money, right? Helping others in need and so on. For example, at our church, right, we don't go around with offering plates or those offering baskets. Right? We have the little box outside. Some churches have an offering time during service where ushers go around with these plates. And you can see how much people put in it. Because, you can see right there too, like, some people put like dollar bills, some people put coins. Right? We can see this. You can see like some people, I forgot my offering, going through their pockets to put whatever bill they have. Some people put like a big stack of money in there and everyone can see it. Some people put like envelopes so no one can see how much they're giving. Right? We don't do that. Right? It was a decision. Instead, we have offering box outside because I wanted your giving to be a moment between you and God. A moment of worship. Meaning worship doesn't begin in here in this room. Worship begins out there. I grew up watching my grandmother going to the bank to get like those crisp new bills for Sundays. Right? Sometimes she would iron the money to make it flat. I mean, and you guys, like some of you grow up with like those like plastic bills here nowadays. They used to be paper, and then you could actually iron these things. You see, she came to faith very late in her life, right? After her husband, my grandfather, miraculously lived. As though to catch up for all the lost time, she became very devoted. And you can see her devotion from Saturday, right? Or even during the week to prepare these offerings, and where she would prepare this offering ahead of time. Nowadays, we have like e-transfers and credit cards to the offerings. And you can even set like recurring payments so that your giving is done automatically. You don't think twice about it. I think it's convenient, and if done right, it fits what Jesus is saying here too. Like how you set it and forget it, which helps you to forget about how much you're giving. It's like your real hands don't know what your digital hands are doing, kind of thing. Now, this is not a debate on whether we should do more cash offerings or digital offerings. But the question is, what is your heart saying when you give to God? When you send a recurring payment, what are you actually doing here? Is it out of convenience, or is it so that you could just set it and forget it because this is your duty to God? Do you say, I hope someone recognizes how much I'm giving to church? Or do you say, I hope God is glorified through this giving? You see, it was never about the money, right? It's about the hearts. It's not wrong to feel good, but the problem is feeling good for the wrong reasons. Am I happy to help the needy because of what I will receive? Or am I happy to give because of the glory that God will receive? Now, some of you may still wonder, why should I give to the needy for God's glory? Can't I just help for the sake of helping? Or why should God receive the glory when I am the one who working hard and sacrificing what I have to help others? And that brings us to the third and last point, giving for God. So again, true giving is not about how much you donate. It's not about how you give either. And not even about who you give to. It's really about knowing who God is and what gives Him joy. The posture for giving that we ought to have is actually found in the next section in the Lord's Prayer, the part of praying. Jesus teaches us the Lord's Prayer, and the first three petitions teaches us about the posture of true giving. And it goes like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When we give so that not so that our names are glorified, but that our Father's name will be magnified, to be recognized as holy, that there is none like Him, that there is no one pure like Him, there is no one as faithful as Him, there is no one as generous as Him. When we give, we aim to be His hands and feet so that they may see our good works and give glory to the Father. And when we give, we do so with the hope that God's kingdom, His rule and reign will be on earth, and His will, His good and acceptable and perfect will be done. When you have this posture, your giving cannot be about yourself, which is also why prayers begin like this, because this prevents your prayers from becoming all about yourself. You do it for His glory. And this kind of giving is true worship. Now, there's a famous verse in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. You may have heard of it before, but then we need to read this in its larger context from verse 7. And let me read that for you. Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? Right, that last verse, you may have heard of it before on like those plaques or even in praise songs. God doesn't care about how much we give. He cares about justice, kindness, mercy, humility. And what is this justice? It's got to do more with restoration of the shalom, right? The peace, completeness, the way things ought to be as God sees it. Poverty and destitute are not what God had intended. The gap between the rich and the poor were great back in Jesus' day, and so it is today as well. And justice is to close that gap. To show kindness is to show what the Hebrew word, the word chesed, right? The Hebrew word chesed, which means faithful love, merciful love, or often translated as steadfast love. It is a covenantal love. It is a deliberate, active devotion and mercy that is freely given. And when we do that, we are humbly walking with God. And when we do that, God sees us. Again, not to punish us when we don't give enough or keep track of how much you give and settle accounts at the day of judgment, but to show us His heart. He wants us to give so that we may understand God's heart, how God feels when He gives to His children in need, to rescue them out of their plight, to restore them to shalom. True giving is true worship because it unites our hearts to God's. And your giving will not go unnoticed. In Matthew chapter 24 and 25, Jesus talks about what it will be like at the end of days. And He gives, famous parables like the parable of the 10 maidens and the parable of the talents. And then in the section called the final judgment, this is what He says. It's chapter 25, verses 31 to 40. Let me read it for you. When the Son of Man, meaning Jesus, comes in His glory and all the angels with Him, then He will sit on His glorious throne. Before Him will be gathered all the nations, and He will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And He will place the sheep on His right, but the goats on the left. Then the King will say to those on His right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." That was a very beatitude language there. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer Him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the King will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." And when we give to those in need, not in order to receive anything back, but out of loving kindness, that is our act of love, an act of worship to the one who gave it all. Because you see, even though Jesus says that we gave to Him in these verses, when we give to our brothers and sisters in need, He is the one who actually gave us everything first. In Romans chapter 8, verse 32, Apostle Paul writes, "He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also with Him graciously give us all things?" You see, this is our Father in heaven. He loves to give. Give, give, give. When we were spiritually poor, when we were lost like lost sheep, when we were like the blind groping in darkness, and when we were hopeless in sin, God gave His Son to us, His beloved Son. And His Son, Jesus Christ, gave His everything to us as well. The King of Kings, the Holy One, the Almighty, He left everything behind and emptied Himself to become like us, a human being, born to poor parents, and laid in a manger surrounded by smelly animals, grew up as a humble carpenter's son, only to be misunderstood, ridiculed, mocked, beaten, scourged, scorned, cursed, and crucified to die a criminal's death. Why would He do that? In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, we see the answer. "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though He was rich, yet for your sake He became poor, so that you by His poverty might become rich. And out of the riches that He gave in our hearts, we can give to others in need also." God enabled us to give true worship through true giving because He gave us everything first. So dear church, when we are so overwhelmed by what He gave us first, what we have already received, we are able to give for God's glory and not for our own. Because He deserves all the praise and all the glory, for He gave it all to us. And it is my prayer that you will partake in the Father's joy as you give to those in need with the same loving kindness that you have received through Jesus. And as a response to that, I want us to sing this song before we close our worship today. It's a song called The Stand. And as you sing these verses, think about what He has given to you. And think about what you can do in response.